Hello and welcome back to biology. Today we're going to continue our lesson on the fundamental properties of life. Okay, so we have finished the biological organization. So we begin with the reproduction and then the rest of the properties. So first is the reproduction. So we have two kinds of reproduction. We have the sexual reproduction and the asexual reproduction. So when you say sexual reproduction, it involves gametes, the sperm and the egg. Okay, so gamete is a collective term for our sperm and egg. Sperm sa lalaki and egg pod sa babae. Okay, so offspring inherits half of the chromosomes from each of the parents, and it involves the fusion of haploid gametes. So some might be able to understand the statement, some maybe not. So atong hinahinayon pag ang pacing na to when it comes to these terms. Humana ta sa sperm and egg. So let's try to have this term, offspring. When you say offspring, meaning anak, inherits, napasa, nakuha. And then, when you say chromosome, so mo ni ang tricking apart here. Kasi some terms are actually almost similar in meaning. So we say that chromosome is that structure inside our cell, specifically in the nucleus, nga nag-contain sa ato ang genetic material, or alternatively, we can say that it's the genetic material. Okay, so just don't be confused about those terms. Now, kaning chromosome is actually made up of a strand of DNA and what? And histones, or histones are a type of proteins. Okay? Now, si chromosome manggod, naadto sa nucleus, and mapasa na siya sa anak. Kato mga traits nato sa parents, naapo dito sa anak, or a blend of those traits. Now, relating to humans, humans are diploid beings or diploid organisms. What do we mean by diploid? Ploidy is a term used to say nga mona ang sets of its chromosomes. Okay? Sets of chromosomes. In our case, humans, we have 46 chromosomes. And each chromosome is paired with another chromosome nga kapareho niya og sets of genes. So for example, if this chromosome has the same sets of genes with this chromosome, this is a paired chromosome. Nagets? So overall, naa sila 46 kabuok and giparis-paris na sila nahimong 23 pairs. So for example, this pair is the chromosome 1. So chromosome 1 pod ni, and then another pair pod, chromosome 2, another pair na pod, chromosome 3, and up to the 23rd pair. Sa 23rd pair na to, those are actually the sex chromosomes. The X chromosome and the Y chromosome. So, moabot rataan na nga part sa ato ang genetics and molecular biology. Now, unsa man dayon? Sa ato ang testicles sa lalaki and sa ovary pod sa babae, ang diploid number of chromosome dito sa ato ang cells is reduced into half. And the resulting cells are the sperm and the egg. The sperm and the egg contains haploid number of chromosomes. So, unsa may nahitabo? Kung sa kadtong si Papa, for example, if the father has 46 chromosomes, and unsa may mahitabo dayon, kailangan bulagon si chromosome 1 o si chromosome 1 para ma-distribute siya dito sa mga gametes or sa sperm ni Papa. Kay kung naay mga problem sa number of chromosomes, then there would be a problem sa bata. Okay? So ma-appreciate ra ninyo once naatay mga actual cases of genetic problems or the genetic disorders. But anyway, karon, since humans are diploid organisms with 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs, what do we do now? Ang mama, sa ovary sa mama, naa dito ang mga egg cell, and each egg cell contains one copy of each of the chromosome. So 23 chromosomes na tanan, kay one copy raman. And then, si Papa pod, naapod siya in a normal person, one copy pod si Papa sa iyahang mga chromosome. Kay nabulag naman tong pairs. Nabungkag man ang pairs. So, unsa man dayon? Once mag-fertilize na, So when they're making love and then na-fertilize ni Papa ang egg, what will happen? Si 23 chromosomes from the sperm and si 23 chromosomes from the egg would combine para mahimong 46 chromosomes na pod, and that is a normal nga number of chromosomes for a human being. Once na ay mga problems with the number of chromosomes, for example, the Down syndrome, the usual reason ana is actually the trisomy 21 or kanang 3 copies of the chromosome 21 sa tao. So for example, hypothetically, si Papa na ay problem sa iyahang sperm in which wala nabulag ang duha ka chromosome 21. And then mo to ang naka-fertilize sa egg cell ni Mama. So normal nga number of chromosomes si Mama 23 ka buok, 1 to up to the 23rd nga chromosome, and then si Papa na ay problem sa iyahang 21st nga chromosome. Kaya instead nga isa, duha ang nabutang dito nga sperm. So, duha ka buok copies sa chromosome 21 sa sperm plus 1 copies sa chromosome 21 sa egg cell, pag fertilize ana, tulo na kabuok. And mura na siya insignificant kay murag isa ra man ka chromosome ang daot. Pero actually, naana siya huge nga effects sa bata, which would cause Down syndrome. Okay? So, ing ana. What about asexual reproduction? So, basically, when you say asexual reproduction, it doesn't involve sperm and egg. Okay? So, walay sex nga mahitabo diri ah. The offspring that arise by asexual reproduction, from either unicellular or multicellular organisms inherit the full set of genes of their parent, which is of course one parent lang because it doesn't involve sex eh. So some examples include binary fission, budding, and fragmentation. So when you say binary fission is actually the mode of reproduction by the archaeans and the bacteria. Okay, so unsa may mahitabo diri ah. Remember nga these are unicellular organisms. So what happens next is that they don't involve sex. What they need to do is just to copy their own genetic material. And then everything will follow nga mo abot dito sa cytokinesis or the division of the cell, and then they give rise to another individual. So naka-reproduce siya. Okay, so that is how binary fission work. What about budding? So si budding, what happens here is that a new individual, develops from a certain part of an existing organism. Okay? So naay term nato kung sa Bisaya pasalinsing. Pag mosalinsing na siya, so ingana ang mahitabo. Pero what happens here is that there will come a time nga kadto siya nga bud, kadto siya nga part sa kadto nga organism would fall off. And then it could start another organism na pod in the next few nga mga times. So si fragmentation, another way of asexual reproduction pod ni. So unlike sa budding although ma-fall off ang new organism or ang kadtong offspring, ma-fall off siya from that existing organism or sa parent niya, some may not. Okay? Ang uban through budding magpundo ra dito, and then they give rise to another organisms na pod, like kanang sa ato ang mga cactus. Here in the fragmentation nga mode of asexual reproduction, when that certain organism reach maturity, they are broken down into fragments. Okay? They are broken down into fragments, and then what happens here is that each of the fragment, for example, you have 2 fragments here, each of them would give rise to another organism, which are the offspring na. So, and then kanipod tong offspring, when it reaches maturity, ma-broken down po siya into fragments or pieces. So, one of the prominent examples for fragmentation are the algae, which are the Spirogyra. Okay? So, unlike sa sexual reproduction, which involved meiosis for the production of gametes, here, in reproduction, mitosis pod ang responsible for for this kind of reproduction. Okay, so I hope nakananatay gauge when we reach other lessons. So next is growth and development. So allow me to read. Organisms grow and develop following specific instructions coded by their genes. Of course. So this gene provides instructions that will direct cellular growth and development, ensuring that an individual will grow to exhibit many of the same characteristics as its parents. So, for example, a human being coming from a zygote or a newly fertilized egg by a sperm, because of that genes nga naa sa ato ang cell, natay ginatawag ng mga fate sa ato ang cells, mga differentiation sa cells. So because of that, naay growth and development. Nga these portions of these blastula or gastrula will become the limbs, and then this will become the heart. Di ba? Naman tayo layers of the embryo sa early nato sa development. So mga ingana ang pasabot aning growth and development. And aside ana, when it comes to wounds, for example, we need to repair ourselves. Di ba? Pag masamad ta, we need to heal ourselves. So, the responsible nga cell division for this is mitosis. Kasi si mitosis manggod, just like what we had in our asexual reproduction, kung unsa to nga mga genetic information ang naa atong nga cell, maura pod to ang ma-produce. That is why sa asexual reproduction, kung unsa to nga sets of information ang naa atong parent, maura pod ang sa anak. The same way sa tao, for example, if you cut your skin, of course, pag mag-heal na siya, skin cells na pod gyapon ang mo mahitabo nga or ma-produce nga cell during wound healing. So that's part of our growth and development. So si bone, of course, katong mga bone cells nato, they would grow at a specific rate, and until that specific year pod sa ato ang growth in a normal person. And every division, of course, bone cell na pod ang ma-produce until it reaches that threshold bale. So that's growth and development. What about response to stimuli? So when it comes to response to the stimulus, for stimulus is singular, stimuli is of course plural. So let's define muna stimulus. It's a detectable change in the physical or chemical structure of an organism's internal or external environment. So the ability, of course, of the organism to detect that stimulus is, of course, what we call as sensitivity or excitability. And we need to have an appropriate reaction for that stimulus. Now, in a normal nga organism, for example, a person, in our younger years, we were taught of that stimulus or this term response to environment, response to stimuli, response to stimulus, that's the same. Kanang mga common lang gani nato nga makita nga, like for example, kung kuhiton ka, kung say buhaton nimo, well, of course, that's response to stimulus. Okay? So, someone who's poking on you, mo na ang stimulus, and then ang imong reaction is either to mulingi ka or dili nimo pansinon. Well, because you're a logical person kasi, you're a logical being. Pero here we have here physical or chemical structure. So in the next item nato, which is homeostasis, we need to really have that fine line between this attribute or property to the homeostasis. Kasi almost the same lang sila. Pero si response to stimulus manggod, it doesn't need to have that balance. Kaya mo na inyong timan-an. Si response to stimuli, it doesn't have to have that balance in our internal environment to be considered response to stimuli. So for example, kanang sa mga plants nga kung asa ang sun didto pod mo atubang ang ilahang growth, it doesn't need it doesn't really need homeostasis for them to have that reaction. it's really their reaction kasi they need the sunlight. Okay, that's one of the fine line nga mailhan nato nga that action of that organism is because of that stimuli and not basically of some kind of homeostatic nga reaction. Okay? So, our running, napod tay, that's, if someone is chasing on you, of course, that's a response to stimuli nga mudagan ka, especially if that stimulus may cause you harm. Okay? So, that's response to stimulus or stimuli. Now, what about kanang sington ka? Is it response to stimuli or homeostasis? Generally, mahimo nato na siya nga response to stimuli. But the very main reason why you are sweating is because you need to what? To maintain that state sa imuhang lawas nga normal. You have your optimum temperature sa imuhang lawas. Okay? So, although, for example, if init kayo ang panahon, you could say nga, yeah, it's a kind of response to stimulus. Kasi init ang panahon, so you need to sweat. But at the same time, you have to have that fine line nga, as what I have said kanina, what's the real meaning of homeostasis? Which is the, what? The state of steady internal, physical, and chemical conditions. So, you are sweating kasi you need to have that steady nga internal and chemical conditions within your body. Kasi, if masubrahan, dili ka masingtan, most likely, you will be having a heat stroke, for example. Okay? So, mao na atong timailhan when it comes to homeostasis and response to stimuli or stimulus. Now, we have here another example. So, medyo technical siya nga part, pero ato lang ning himoong simple. What is an insulin? It's the hormone that acts as a key para maksulod tong glucose na to from the bloodstream to the cells. Okay? What about glucagon? This is glucagon ha. So si glucagon mo ni siya ang mubungkag sa ato ang glycogen sa liver para mahimong glucose. So medyo libog sa uban. So unsa may mahitabo? We have here the blood sugar homeostasis or ang normal level sa sugar diha sa atong bloodstream. So here ang mahitabo actually ani is that when the blood sugar increases, okay, when the blood sugar increases, si pancreas would release insulin. Okay? Why? To store sugar in the liver and at the same time, to let the glucose enter the cells all over our body. Now, when the blood sugar decreases below sa optimum level, which is usually is 80 to 90 milligram per deciliter, kanang sa ato mga diabetic nga mga relatives na ana sila ay gina-maintain nga blood sugar. So when that blood sugar decreases, what happens next? Si pancreas mag-release og glucagon. So katong mga na-store nga sugar in the liver, which we term as glycogen, will be broken down by glucagon into glucose. And that glucose nga na-release or nabungkag will be fed into the bloodstream para mauna po'y what? Mauna po'y isulod dito sa atong mga cells para ma-maintain nato ang normal nga blood sugar. So that's how we understand homeostasis or we explain homeostasis. We have this chemical balance nga na kinahanglan i-maintain or equilibrium as what we usually say. Okay? What about here? Anabolism and catabolism for the energy processing nato or the metabolism. So, anabolism first is the set of metabolic pathways that construct molecules from smaller units or the monomers, right? And then for the catabolism, it's the set of metabolic pathways that breaks down molecules into smaller units. So, unsa may mga examples ani? For anabolism, One example here is kadtong pag-build up sa glycogen. Okay? Kadtong pag si insulin that stores the sugar in the liver, kadto siya kasi sobra na ang bloodstream, so some of the glucose will be stored in the liver as glycogen. So kanang glycogen is a polymer, murag yapon siya starch, okay? Dito ma-store sa ato ang liver. That's some kind of anabolism. And then, okay, I hope everyone are able to follow. Kapag catabolism na, what happens here is that, ang saman, sa example na to kanina sa homeostasis, sa catabolism, katong ato ang glycogen, which was stored in the liver, will be broken down by glucagon to become glucose na naman. So that's kind of catabolism. So as simple as chewing your food is already a form of catabolism. Okay? So inana na siya. So daghan pa yung mga examples about it. So we can learn them as we go on our course. And lastly, here is the evolution. So I don't want to dwell on this for this time muna kasi we will dedicate a certain lesson for this in our next nga mga session, okay? But let's try to have an overview. So as it states, evolution is the change in the heritable characteristics of biological populations over successive generations. Okay? That's evolution. So we need to familiarize some terms here which include natural selection, descent with modification, and speciation. So I hope you will be able to read in advance or familiarize in advance these terms. Pero I would like to emphasize nga dili na siya like kanang sa Pokemon nato nga gina-imagine gani nga if this organism or this monster changes into this kind of monster na naman, that's already evolution. Well, in its very literal sense, that's change kasi synonym man na ang evolve og change eh. Synonym man na sila. But in the context of biology, in the context of the origin of the species, that's a very different thing. Kasi as what we have said here, population. It doesn't involve an individual. It needs to have a population that changes over several generations. So it needs thousands, hundreds of years, generations to come up with a certain species, to come up with a new species. Okay? So natural selection, descent with modification, and speciation, those are the key terms here to really understand evolution. Dili pasabot nga nagbaha. And then for a very long period nga sige kag langoy-langoy, you will develop hasang sa murag sa isda. It doesn't follow like that. Okay? Dili ing ana ang evolution. And you will learn how evolution works in the next sessions nato.